Welcome back to the Start and Scale podcast. I'm your host, Jack Brandwood, and in this series, we're diving headfirst into the world of tech with the people who are coding the future from the front lines. This is the place where we refactor the way you think about scaling tech teams, debugging their journeys, reviewing their stories, and pushing boundaries to ship better insights. Whether you're a seasoned techie who's seen your fair share of legacy code, an aspiring professional ready to deploy your skills, or just fascinated by the world of technology, this episode will give you unique insights and practical takeaways to add to your backlog.
I think there's lots of people out there that are doing AI for AI's sake, really, without really thinking about the value it will bring.
So grab your headphones, commit to this listen, and let's sprint into another episode. I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Matt, thanks for coming on.
Good to be here, thanks.
Yeah, you've lent us your offices for the day, so thank you so much.
No problem, you're welcome.
Yeah, gorgeous offices. How often are you in?
Not that much these days. I think probably kind of once a week or so.
Right.
So yeah, not much as was before.
Yeah, where you're nearby, right? You're like an hour.
So I live about an hour or so from London. So on a good day, it's kind of an hour. On a bad day, it could be an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on how the trains are.
It's crazy though, because we're from up north. If it's more than 15 minutes, we're just like, no, we can't do it. No chance. But in London, like an hour is kind of normal, isn't it? Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, even sort of across London can take an hour, 2 hours sometimes, right? So.
Yeah, it's mad. I've booked a few meetings before in London. At the beginning of my career, booking meetings in London, and I realised I booked them all over, like North London, East London, I managed it on time, luckily. But I'll never do that again because it was on the tube for a collective of about 4 or 5 hours, I think.
In fact, probably about 5 years ago, I lived down in Kent and I was working in London. So it was quite often I would be working sort of either central London or even kind of a bit further out. So quite often it would be sort of 2 hours to get to the office, 2 hours back. It was a standard commute for me. So nowadays, kind of, an hour commute, I'm quite happy with that. I've certainly had a lot worse.
Well, leading on to my next question, apart from being a serial commuter, who is Matt Belcher?
What a question. Yes, I guess I'll start with my job title. So I'm from Codurance. So I head up the emerging tech part of Codurance in the UK. So what do I do as part of that role? So I do lots of work with sort of business leaders, really, CTOs, heads of engineering, talking about what's new in the tech space. So most recently, it's been AI and data. They've been, no surprise there, they've been two big themes that I think have dominated recently. So how can business leaders use AI to properly deliver business value, leverage that in the right way, build the right solutions that actually kind of the customers will want to see and deliver the right value.
Yeah, I can imagine you've been talking a lot about AI recently. Before we go into AI, because that's obviously going to be a lot, we're going to talk about that a lot. You weren't always the head of emerging technology at Codurance, and I did kind of pre-warn you that you were going to draw some.
Oh, you did, yes.
Our vision at Tact is to create a world where everyone gets their dream job.
Yeah.
So we've tied that into this little activity. Could you draw what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Oh, I'll try.
Yeah, don't worry, everyone's a terrible, especially when you put on the spot, you're on camera.
Yeah.
It gets bad.
Shall I talk through it?
That'd be great. Thank you.
So I think probably like most kids in the UK at least, my number one career choice was a footballer.
Of course,
right. So that would have been my number one career, if you like. Unfortunately, it never quite happened. Unfortunately for me, not through want of trying, but.
Nice.
That was my number one career choice, was to be a footballer.
That's brilliant drawing. And what I've noticed is that no one can draw a football correctly. The passes, no one can. It's impossible. It really is. That's the picture. Better than most. Is that dream still alive? Is it dead?
I think it's probably dead now. I'm 37, so it's probably kind of probably dead. Perhaps a veterans team out there will take me. I don't know.
Who knows? Might end up playing Dubai, something like that.
Yeah. I'll take it.
So how did you get to where you are now?
Good question. Yeah. So I guess the football dream eventually didn't kind of pan out, unfortunately. But I think I've always liked solving problems and building things. From a young age, sort of with Lego sets and Meccano, kind of building things. And trying to solve problems, would that be kind of Sudoku or crosswords and things. And I remember being a youngish kid, and my classroom had a computer in the classroom for the first time. And you get some time throughout the week to use it. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. Like I can solve problems, I can explore, I can build things using this thing called a computer. And it was amazing. It was kind of a real eye-opener for me. I think that sort of sparked something in me then in terms of technology. And I think ever since then, really, I've had kind of a passion for technology. But I think also using technology to solve problems and to build things. There's something quite satisfying where you're really solving a particular problem by using tech to do that. I think like creating stuff that wasn't there before. You're building some software, whether that be a website or something like that. That thing wasn't there before, and you've built that from scratch and you've created it, and now that exists and people are hopefully using it. I think that's quite a rewarding process, I think.
And now you're helping people do the same, right?
That's it, yeah. So I probably spent about 15 years, I think, probably now in sort of software consultancy. So I think as part of that, I've been quite lucky to work in lots of different areas, like technologies, countries as well. I've been quite fortunate to work in different countries, India, France, Spain. So I've been quite fortunate in sort of having lots of different experiences around technology, not just the tech itself, but different people, different cultures, seeing how different teams work together to build software solutions. So yeah, I think I've been quite lucky on that journey, I think, around sort of consultancy. But I think that's enabled me, I think, to really have quite a well-rounded view of what it takes to build good software beyond just the technology itself. I think you really do appreciate, as a consultant, like the people aspect of building software. And often I think some of the more interesting problems are those that sort of come across people, technology and process. Though where those three things come together, that's where I tend to find the most fun problems are, where those three things come together. And I've been fortunate enough in my career so far, there's been a good number of those problems to solve.
Out of interest, you've travelled around, which is fantastic as part of your job. Do different cultures have different approaches to technology? The way they approach technology?
I think there's generally sort of technology waves, I think. So you'll have some countries or some regions that are looking to be the first move or like the first adopters to certain technologies, whereas others are perhaps a little bit more cautious and want to sort of see other regions test the water first before they make some movements. But generally speaking, I think beyond that, there's not a whole lot of difference really in my experience.
Isn't that? And I just think that's the beautiful thing. I know that technology has different languages that you code in, that sort of thing, but it is like a universal language, really, right? It's just it means the same in most languages.
I'll tell you a funny story. Like I was working for a customer in Germany for about a year, quite a large retail e-commerce customer, and they had a code base that was using the Java programming language. But they were going through a transition where they had named all of the variables and methods and classes in their code in German. But they were trying to sort of gradually move away to English because they wanted to kind of work with a broader, wider set of developers from different countries. So when I joined the code base, or the team, the code base was in this kind of weird transition phase. And so normally if you're a developer and you try to refactor something, the IDE you're working in, it will do a rename and it will find everything that matches that name. But that doesn't work when you've got things that are in different languages. So that was quite fun sometimes. Oh no! Trying to deal with the code base that was sort of half English, half German.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that being an issue. I guess that's the thing, right? That's the brilliant thing about your job. You probably come across different use cases and different problems and different issues to solve that you would never in a million years be able to make up. Which I quite love.
And also, I think some of that sort of the weird and wonderful ways that people have managed to take certain technologies and bend them and twist them to solve some quite obscure problems sometimes as well.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's well, and talking about solving problems using tech, AI.
Yes.
AI. Do you think that all businesses should be like kind of incentivized and prioritize adding AI or building AI into their products?
I think it's a good question. I think now is definitely the time for businesses to start thinking about what AI means for them. I think those that don't are going to find themselves getting left behind, I think. But I think it's not a case of kind of rush ahead and build everything in AI as quick as you can. I think I would still be cautious about it. But I think it's important to understand it and understand what AI means for you and your business. And what are the key use cases that make sense for you to adopt AI? I think there's lots of people out there that are sort of almost sort of doing AI for AI's sake, really, without really thinking about the value it will bring. So I think it's really important that companies are thinking about AI and having AI on their roadmap, just to kind of understand. I think with like any kind of new technology, I think you have to understand what it means for you. Is it going to impact your business? And where the sweet spots are for your organization as well. How can you best leverage that to enhance your products, like your customers, increase productivity, all those kinds of things.
Are there particular businesses that either you've seen or you imagine that AI wouldn't be a fit for?
I can't think of any at the moment. I think it's quite a vast field, particularly AI. I think more recently we've heard lots talking about sort of generative AI or Gen AI, but I think if you zoom out, like AI is a really vast field, right? Beyond just machine learning, there's other parts of AI too. But I think the likes of ChatGPT have come along, and people are focusing on sort of Gen AI and kind of what that can do. But I think if you're kind of thinking about AI more broadly, there's so many use cases that I think can be applied. So I can't think of a particular industry or vertical that there wouldn't be a benefit of using AI. But I think it's important to understand what that benefit will be, and not just implement AI projects for the sake of having AI on your solution.
Yeah, I've heard of a lot of businesses recently who are incentivizing their departments or heads of department with money, like you are targeted on spending X amount on an AI solution. Which is that like you said, that's kind of like AI for AI's sake, right? It's if you'd like, you need to spend this much on an AI solution.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of kind of a race almost to sort of to be the first big adopters in your space, kind of first mover advantage. I think there's a lot of that sort of jostling for position in terms of AI. I think in some ways, I think it is good to incentivize teams to start to think about AI and sort of what that might mean for them and what the key use cases are for those. But I think, as I was just saying, I think AI for AI use, AI for AI's sake in the long run, I think doesn't really bring that much benefit. I think you want to make sure that if you are following AI projects, they're grounded in some kind of business value that you're going to get from it.
Will robots take over the world, do you think?
That's a good question. I guess like the sort of sci-fi fan of me kind of would think, oh, maybe. But I think in truth, probably not. I think there's lots been made around kind of AI recently, right? But I think we've yet to see sort of general intelligence be developed. So what I mean by that, so beyond just being able to automate a task, being able to have emotional responses, feelings, being able to apply some learning across a really broad set of fields. We've not really got that yet, and people argue we won't ever get to that point. So I think that's a key thing I think to think about. I think what we will see though, I do think we'll see AI kind of be a lot more pervasive in our everyday lives. I think in that sense, talking about robotics, another field of AI alongside machine learning, I think we will see more of that. And if you look around you now, you are starting to see some more robotics kind of creep into our lives. I think we'll see more of that. I think we'll see robotics being used to do things that humans can't do, or in situations where it's dangerous to send a human. You could imagine, for example, kind of using robotics to sort of fight fires, those kind of things. There's even been talk of using robotics in sort of space travel, for example, to test kind of what that's like without sending a human. So I think those kind of areas, I think, where it's difficult or hard or dangerous for humans to do a particular task. I think that's probably where we could leverage robotics going forward. I think in terms of sort of taking over the world and that sort of doomsday story, I don't think so personally. But I think what does need to happen fairly soon, I think, is some governance around AI. There's been lots of talk about that recently in social media and things around kind of AI and AI for good. I think that needs to develop a lot more. I think kind of making sure that we're using AI, but having some guardrails in how we're using it.
Yeah, you're an optimist, which is great, obviously. Yeah, I think it's going to surely create more jobs than it will destroy, or at least offer a better quality of life for things like data entry and these things where we've got these amazing human minds where they're so creative and whatever. They can be freed up to do tasks like you said that robots can't.
I think that's right. I think there's a big panic some years ago in the accounting world, for example. So for a long time, sort of accounting relied on kind of physical bookkeeping, right? And then you get the likes of Microsoft Excel kind of pops up. And there's a big sort of, what does that mean for accountancy? How can all lose our jobs? Of course, no, right? But it's enhanced the field some more. And I think it's just the same thing with AI and with automation. I think what will happen is, as you said, I think we'll be able to automate some of the more mundane tasks, if you like, and free humans up to do some of the more complex and challenging things. And I think you're seeing that a little bit now in software development with some of the code generation tools that are sort of being introduced, like GitHub Copilot, AWS Code Whisperer. The good use cases for those, I think, are trying to automate some of the more boilerplate code, the mundane code. But I think as a human, you still need to be involved in the more complex, like design aspects, like the algorithms, those kind of things. So I think it's kind of freeing up humans to spend more time and focus more on the more complex problems. And that's, I think, where AI can supplement, as opposed to take our jobs away, if you like.
Yes, I got it. So rather than taking half of your job, is kind of like, well, it is, but then it's also nudging you a bit forward and being like, hey, you go and do that other stuff, I'll take care of this.
Yeah. In the same way, I think that many years ago, we had kind of advances around like the washing machine and the dishwasher, for example. I think like the time you get from that, you're able to do other things. I think it's a similar concept here, I think.
Yeah, no one thinks about technology in that respect though anymore, right? I mean, as soon as something works completely perfectly and it's integrated into our lives perfectly, it then becomes it's no longer is technology, airplane.
Yeah. That's it. I think that's a really good point. I think we'll start to see more of that. I think with AI, I think we've not really seen that sort of transition. I think lots of AI is still kind of on the side. You download an app for ChatGPT, for example. You have to go out of your way to do that. I think what you'll start to see more of kind of AI tooling natively embedded in our everyday lives. I think it's not too far away that we get that kind of that seamless transition. Then it almost sort of goes into the background and you forget it's there. I think at the moment it's still very much, it's a conscious decision that I'm going into ChatGPT to ask it to do something. I think that sort of interaction, I'm pretty sure will evolve over time. I think one of the evolutions we'll see actually is the way in which we interact with technology will change. I think it's still very much, we're typing on a keyboard to interact with technology. I think we'll see more voice interactions, I think.
Oh, interesting.
Going forward. I think it makes sense, doesn't it? I think like we as humans converse using speech most of the time. That's a more natural form of communication for us. The fact that we kind of have to sort of type commands into a keyboard is still a little bit clunky, I think. But I think that gap will close over time. And to be fair, you're starting to see it a little bit now. I think like ChatGPT, for example, offers voice to text.
That dictation sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I think you'll see more of that, I think.
Yeah. Although I think dictations are great. If you're on a move and you just want to speak out, and more 99% of the time gets every word right, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Even the punctuation and things like that's crazy.
Yeah. No, that's really, really good. So I think that will be an evolution. I think that we see more voice kind of interaction with technology.
How do you keep abreast of these emerging technologies? Like, because it's your full-time job, right? How do you make sure you're at the bleeding edge of this stuff?
It's a good question. I think it's difficult. I think you have to sort of choose a focus area a little bit. There's so much going on in technology. Everything moves so fast that I think there's something. I think the trick is to try to understand which things are going to be the ones that sort of take off and kind of have a real benefit. Which are the ones that are sort of going to just fizzle out and die. I've not mastered that myself. I'm still kind of trying to figure that out, but I think that's the sort of the trick to it, I think. But yeah, I think like just sort of being aware of advances in sort of technology around some of the big companies that are kind of pushing things forward. The big sort of technology companies, like what they're doing, innovating with technology. I think that's important. I do a lot of reading, as you might expect. People are always sending me things to read, new research and publications and things. I think that's important. I also talk to a lot of people as well, funny enough. I think that's also quite a key thing. I think we're all working on different things and exposed to different things. And I think going out there and talking to people, going to events and meetups and conferences and just hearing different ideas, I think that's actually really, really key as well. So yeah, I always learn something new when I go to a conference or a meetup.
Yeah, I feel like people are more probably open to like discussing any like ham-fisted approach that they've been trying out, or rather than they won't write a blog post about this failed project that they created, right? Like they're more open at networking events to be like, hey, try this thing out. It didn't work. I feel like we're an idiot. Here we go. But then that can lead on to something else. But that's not something that you would get written down.
Exactly, yeah. I think that goes back to your earlier point about companies trying to use AI now. So I think by trying it and adopting it now, you're learning, right? You're going to be learning kind of what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what things you want to drop, what things you want to sort of progress through, enhance. So I think that's one of the best ways of doing it, I think.
And that you mentioned before about trying to differentiate between what's just like a bit of a bubble right now and what's actually going to stick around. I mean, blockchain is a great example of that, right? It's some fantastic businesses have used blockchain, but and obviously cryptocurrencies and all that sort of thing. But I'm sure there was a lot of skeptics at the beginning when blockchain first came around, being like, this won't catch on, there's no use case for it. And it'd be interesting if you were good at doing that, then on the back of that, you could probably create some pretty amazing businesses if you knew that technology was going to stick around. Yeah, it's betting the right horse, I guess.
Yeah, and that's difficult, right? Because sometimes that's the best tech doesn't always win as well, right? Because sometimes market forces or sort of consumers prefer one or the other. That's just the way that sometimes that happens, right? There's various examples of that through history. It's the classic one tends to be kind of VHS versus Betamax, right? Like, yeah. Betamax was arguably better technology, but VHS kind of eventually won out because people just preferred that. So there's that as well, I think.
That's an interesting story. Well, so why was Betamax better?
Well, you put me on the spot now. But.
Sorry. but it was better technically.
Yeah.
But people just preferred VHS. That's interesting.
No, I think that's one of the things where I think it's hard to know up front sometimes which ones will succeed and which ones won't. I think something like blockchain's interesting. I think that could still pick up and take off. I think for the right use cases, though, I think so I've seen blockchain being used successfully for smart contracts, for example, where companies want to put a sort of level of trust in between them in terms of how they're exchanging and trading things.
Oh, interesting.
And putting that on a ledger that can be tracked. But that's quite a specific use case. I think with AI, you're seeing there's lots of use cases there, and so I think that the draw is much bigger for a wider set of consumers.
Yeah, of course. But then it's like you've got like a choice paralysis then, I guess, a little bit, haven't you, if it can be used for anything and everything. Whereas if you've got like a pointy solution that's only for one particular thing, it's kind of like, oh, that does this, great, move on.
Yeah.
There was another piece of emerging technology that you mentioned the other day, the RAG.
That's correct, yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, good question again.
You tried to explain it to me, by the way, but I just didn't get it. Yeah.
So I think this is becoming quite a popular design for AI solution that we are seeing. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So I'll try to explain this as simply as I can.
Thank you.
So if you look at ChatGPT, for example, everyone's seen that and kind of played with that. So I think that's quite a good one to cite. That's really good at being able to answer quite general questions, right? So ChatGPT was trained on a huge amount of public data. So you can ask it questions about kind of publicly accessible things, and it will tell you the answer. The answers it gives you back, though, you have no way of knowing kind of actually where did that answer come from. What sources were used to generate that answer? You don't know, right? All you see is the text response from ChatGPT. So you don't really know kind of what the source was, even how trustworthy that source is, right? You just don't know. Another thing with that is sometimes you'll want to ask a very specific question about a specific context that's relevant to you or your organization. But to get an answer to that question relies on the model, so ChatGPT, for example, having access to that data. And chances are it won't have access to that data unless that data was publicly available. So, for example, let's say you wanted to ask a question about your company's leave policy. ChatGPT won't know that data because that's information that's private to your organization. So what we're seeing now as kind of an evolution of things like ChatGPT is augmenting the underlying large language models with external data. So often data from your own organization. And what you can do then is you can use that to solve the two things I just said there. So you can build solutions then that are able to answer quite specific questions. So, for example, within Codurance, we've built an application that we can ask it information about our leave policies, for example, because it's been trained. It has access to all of our internal data. So it's able to tell you what that information is. But also, when it returns the answer, it returns a link to the document where it got the answer from. So you would know that it's coming from a trustworthy source. It's not just kind of plucking that out of thin air.
Is there a concern? I mean, that sounds incredible, like amazing. Is there a concern that internal data will then be shared in the wider kind of ChatGPT space?
No, so I mentioned ChatGPT as an example, but we're not using ChatGPT for our solution. We've built our own solution. What we're doing though is we're leveraging an open source large language model, but we're hosting that internally ourselves.
Wow. Okay.
And then by augmenting that with sort of our own external data sources, if you like, we're able to get a much more specific answer to quite to questions around Codurance that we couldn't get, for example, if we asked ChatGPT. So I think it's quite a good use case for many areas. So imagine, for example, you have an organisation that has lots of internal documentation that's perhaps kind of hard to navigate and hard to find answers to certain questions. You could imagine kind of building a sort of chat interface that's fed with all that data that gets passed to a large language model, and then it allows you to query all that vast amounts of data in sort of a natural text format. So quite powerful.
Yeah, that sounds like a no-brainer as well, especially if you're either a large organisation or an organisation that's growing quite quickly for onboarding and training.
Yeah.
And it must free up your managers. Must free up your managers somewhat if they're consistently being asked questions that are just in the handbook. Check the handbook, and they can just go type it.
Yeah, it's great for onboarding
Wow.
and sort of freeing up people's time for answering those sort of questions. We've also seen use cases for like customer facing use cases too. So, for example, automating some of the heavy lifting around sort of customer service. So if you bought a product online and you want to query your order, some of that can be automated because you can feed the model all of the product history, all the order history, and you can have a conversation because it has all the context of your order and what you ordered and when you ordered it and the price and all those kinds of things. Often, for example, if you are trying to, let's say you've bought something on the internet and it's being delivered to your house next week, but you want to change the date, that's often kind of a phone call to customer services. Like we're seeing use cases where that's also being captured now in by AI, that you can do that yourself.
Wow.
So there's some really quite cool use cases around RAG.
Yeah. Wow. And is that still in the early days, RAG? Like it's not.
Yeah, it's still fairly early in terms of, I think, being mature, but I think we are seeing it as quite a popular pattern that is being used for AI solutions because of the things like I said before around the limitations around some of the models as they are, particularly if you're wanting to build solutions that are quite specific to your use case, for example.
And again, as someone who's abreast of emerging technologies, have you got any predictions for the next 3 to 5 years on what we should be keeping an eye out for?
That's a great question. It's probably a couple, I think.
Okay.
I think, so I think as I was saying before, I think AI will be more and more pervasive in our society. I think it'll get to a point where it'll almost disappear a little bit into the background. It'll be so seamless. I also think I've been keeping kind of half my eye on this for a little while. I think quantum computing will start to be a little bit more popular than it is. I think that's interesting. So it's not really taken off yet, but I think as and when like the quantum computers and the hardware around that becomes more available, I think you'll start to see probably two things. First of all, the sort of developer community start to build programs that can probably leverage these quantum computers, and then kind of organizations will start to adopt and trial it as well, I think. But we're not really seeing it yet because I think the quantum computers, they're not as available as I think you would need them to be.
So, sorry, for a layperson, quantum computing, what is that?
That's a good question. So generally within computing, data is stored as kind of zeros and ones, kind of binary. With quantum computing, there's a third state, kind of a middle state, which is, I think that's it opens up lots of interesting possibilities and some maybe mildly scary ones too. Perhaps on the more scary end, if you like, is lots of modern day encryption that we use every day, for banking and finance. Those algorithms, they only really work because the time taken to break the algorithm would be so long that by the time you've cracked it, the information you've cracked is no longer useful. However, with quantum computing, I think that time will come down massively, and so it starts to threaten some of those algorithms that are kind of fundamental building blocks for some of the security that we have today. So that's a slight scary thing to think about.
Oh God. Okay. So quantum computing. So the world's going to end, isn't it? Basically, quantum computing, RAG, but AI being more pervasive in our day to day. Anything else you think we should be keeping an eye out for?
Lots of things, I think. I do think there's going to be something around like the metaverse. I think we've seen little bits of that. I think kind of like headsets, kind of VR headsets and things. I think that will develop. I think that will become I think it's still you're sort of looking for a real killer use case that people say, yeah, this is it. I think if it finds that, I think that will also take off. I think.
Yeah.
In the same way that I think for a long time people were kind of buying 3D TVs in the hope that kind of like that will take off. That never really took off.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of still waiting for that sort of killer use case. But I saw a really interesting video the other day. It was a little bit like kind of sort of Star Trek-y, where there was a guy, a teacher, I think, and he was able to be in a different country to his pupils, but they utilised some really cool technology in the classroom so that he could appear as though he was in the classroom via a hologram.
Whoa!
Despite the fact that he was in a different country, but so he was talking as though he was in front of the children and everything, but actually it was a hologram. So that was really cool. I don't know how far away that is from being sort of more widely available, but that was an interesting use case.
Wow.
That was all. I think it was a very small trial, but I think the fact that they can do things like that already, I think is super interesting.
Yeah, I guess it must be such an interesting job because you must be keeping such a close ear to the ground, looking for those indicators of like, oh, here we go. Then things really getting picked up. And this is a bit of a strange question. Are there any pieces of technology that didn't catch on that you heard of that just didn't? Betamax being one of them, obviously.
Also, I think sort of technology has evolved to such a rate that where you would have different tech products for different use cases, I think now you're seeing those all coming together as one. Mm-hmm. So maybe the classic one is like the cameras, right? So there was a time where everyone had a sort of digital camera. That was like the cool thing to have, right? Nowadays, people just get their phone out and take a picture.
Yeah.
So I think like technology, sometimes I think that tech can advance in such a way that it kind of just changes the way that we use certain products and certain services and like perform certain tasks. Nowadays, I can write emails on my phone. I can take pictures. I can do all sorts of things. Whereas before, you just couldn't do that. So you had the individual products for each one.
So I guess what you just need to be open to change and just understand that what's happening now is definitely not going to stick around.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point to make. I think whether we like it or not, as a business, change will be kind of thrust upon us, right? Look kind of recently, like the economy and then COVID, like all these things had massive change across the world, people's lives. I think as organisations, business were thrust into this change sort of during COVID. Like how do we handle with our people kind of being at home? How do we kind of enable working from home setups and all those kinds of things? How do we pivot our business in some cases? I think businesses that are generally like the more successful over time are the ones that are embracing change and designing their systems in a way that can cope for change. And if you look through history is littered with organisations that just been disrupted because they didn't pay attention to that fact. I mean, in the UK, you probably remember Blockbuster Video, right? I remember being a kid and going to the video store and renting a video out and watching it at home and taking it back. Where's that now?
Yeah.
No one's doing that anymore, right?
Almost overnight, just like
yeah. But they were disrupted, and a large part of that was the technology came along, but they didn't move with the technology. Another one's Apple, right? You look at Apple now in terms of the music industry. If you think about really the people that were best set to build like iTunes as a platform and those kind of things were the record labels, right? They had all the content. They knew the industry, but again, they didn't kind of push on from a tech perspective and kind of embrace what was happening. Embrace the fact that the internet was becoming more and more mature. People were more comfortable buying things online and consuming content online, and almost overnight you saw the likes of iTunes and Apple Music kind of pop up. And you think about it now, and you think kind of, that's always been there, but it wasn't the case, right? So I think being able to embrace change and design for change is a really key point.
Neil deGrasse Tyson was on a podcast, and I'm going to butcher everything that he says, but he talks about, I think he's asked the question, what are you most worried about for the next, it's happening in the next 50 years, 100 years, something like that. And he said, and he gave a lot of examples. It was like, in 1990, we were worried about this. In 2000, we were worried about Y2K, and in 2010, we were worried about, I don't know, this. It's like, it's hard to be worried about anything because things change so quickly. And also, the thing that's going to affect my life is something that probably doesn't exist right now because things are changing so quickly. So there's no point. You're going to kind of put up with the change, realize that new things are going to come around that you know nothing about. So there's no point being worried about things because it's happening. Get on board.
I think that's right. I think as an organisation, I think it is really important that you're starting to kind of put the feelers out on new technologies. But I think don't rush into it either. Do it in a cautious way. Make sure you understand the new tech you're thinking of adopting. Understand like the risks involved. How you're going to use it. How will it bring business value? Is it kind of here to stay, or is it going to be kind of a flash in the pan? And it's kind of understanding kind of where that fits in your business is important. I think as much as you can, try to embrace the fact that there will be change of some kind.
And this kind of ties into the last question, and I promise I'll let you go. For anyone out there right now who's listening to this and has a cool idea and they want to build it, or a product they think people need, what words of wisdom would you give them?
Good question again. I think there's probably a couple of things. So one pattern I see a lot with startups and founders, that they have a cool idea and they're so excited to build this thing that they spend a long time building the product without really taking it into market, getting any feedback. So I think my first tip would be to build the smallest possible thing that you can that will deliver some value, and then ship that, put that in front of customers, get feedback, understand if the idea that you had really is something that people want and aren't going to buy and aren't going to use. If that kind of lands well, then great. You know you have a market. You can then start to invest some more. You don't want to invest too much to later find out that the idea you had wasn't so great anyway, and nobody really wants it. So you want to really kind of get that time to validate your idea and get that feedback down as short as possible. I think secondly is, particularly nowadays, I think as a founder and as a startup company, think about like what you need to build versus what you can get off the shelf. Lots of companies, I think, often sort of spend too much building things that they don't really need to build. and building things that don't really add core value to the thing that they're building. So, for example, I think particularly most of the big cloud providers, AWS, Microsoft, Amazon, they have a large array of services that you can start to consume, and it might be that you can use lots of those things and stitch them together, and then the core of your business, the core of your idea, that's what you build. Everything else around it, maybe you can kind of leverage existing services, existing products and tools to do that, do the rest of it for you. That does two things. I think one, it shortens the time to market because you're just building less. Two, I think the team that you need to build your product is then less. But also, I think three, it kind of frees you up to focus on the actual USP, the value that you're going to bring through your product. You're not spending time, for example, building something that's already been solved as a solved problem. You're not spending time, for example, figuring out how to do authentication, for example. That's a solved problem, right? Or how to manage secrets. Those are solved problems that there are services available out there that can do that and do that really, really well. Don't build that. Spend time building the thing that's actually unique to your product.
That's a really good piece of advice. Thank you. Well, look, it's been amazing speaking to you. I feel like because of the job that you do, we could have spoken for ages and never-ending subjects, obviously. But no, look, I really appreciate your time. And obviously everyone knows Codurance, I hope. But Codurance are doing amazing things, so follow them on LinkedIn. And hope to speak to you again soon.
Likewise. Thank you.
And that's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Anything we talked about will be linked in the show notes. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll catch you on the next one.